Sebastian, whatever you say is being recorded and summarized.
All right.
Whatever you're telling Nate.
Okay.
You can get seated.
Let's go ahead and get started, folks. So once again, this is the IETF Note Well. You should be familiar with it by now, but if not, please do take some time to do so by using your favorite internet search engine. These are the policies under which we participate here. Also, as a reminder, we do have a lot of remote participants, and audio being the way that it is, we're going to ask that folks abstain from having side conversations or making lots of extraneous noise. And when you're speaking, please do so distinctly and loudly, even uncomfortably loudly for some people. So today, we have half of a day. We're scheduled up until 1 p.m., I believe. We may use all of that time, we may not. We've gone through everything on the issues list that we identified in the agenda, which is great. Congratulations. Thank you all very much. Good. Is that good enough for you, Paul?
It's the end of the day, Mark.
Oh, damn it. So what we thought we might do is to reprise a few of the key areas we've discussed. And I think first we're going to take a quick look back at search, where we ended up yesterday, to see if anybody had any reflections or suggestions pop into their minds between the end of the meeting yesterday and this morning. Then we'll do likewise for the training term. We'll briefly go back to section 3.2, which I think Martin had made a few adjustments to the PR we can take a look at, and if other people have any reflections. We're not going to spend a tremendous amount of time on either of those three. We just want to see if we can get a little bit of extra juice out of the discussion while we're all here in the room or synchronously online. And then we can spend a little time going back to the use discussion, seeing if people have had any thoughts about requirements or proposals or trying to get a little more context on what the problems and what the possibilities are there, so that people can go away and come up with more fully formed proposals. If we'll see how that discussion goes. It might be that we break early and allow a smaller group of folks to go off and have a more unstructured, casual discussion. And if that's the right thing to do, we'll do that. But I don't expect we're going to come to any significant progress with use today. But if we can have a little preliminary discussion to help launch those further efforts, I think that'd be a really good use of our time here, if that makes sense. And we'll also, we talked briefly yesterday about future arrangements. I don't know if there's anything to add to that at this point. So I think we don't need to do that, do we?
No, I think like we did briefly talk about like upcoming meeting stuff. Like maybe we can kind of wrap on it for people who are not here yesterday.
Sure. 5-minute summary of that. Yeah. But otherwise, we'll of course talk about next steps based upon where we're at the end of the day. But I think we all kind of roughly know what that looks like in terms of we need more proposals. We need to refine the text that we do have. Take home all the things we've talked about this week and reflect on it, see if we can fine tune it and confirm that it's the right way to go. Oh, thank you. And yes, we have notes being taken. Thank you very much. If folks could collaborate, contribute to that, that would be really helpful. Okay, so let's get the note ball off the screen or do this. Why is my browser not responding? There we go.
Are you not using Firefox?
He's using a real browser.
Let's go. Sure are. Safari.
Oh no, there's no real browser.
So how is the network going to look better?
Should probably try the live today.
So we had cert, and from memory that was, we selected 201, correct? Yep. So this is the language where we ended up yesterday. Make it a little bit bigger for folks if I can. Did anybody have any thoughts about this, or Martin, this was stable after the meeting, wasn't it?
Yeah. hasn't changed since we last.
Happy to leave this where it is. Just wanted to give folks an opportunity to make any further comments about it.
Again, there's the existing sentence that's just been tweaked a tiny bit.
Sure.
Above.
Any thoughts about substantive, non-substantive? It's in there
Yeah, Chris.
twice.
That was the sticking point before, was the substantive, substantive.
Substantive.
Yeah,
I think there's been an issue filed for that.
good.
Is it?
I,
There's a raised hand.
there is a raised hand.
Chris?
202, Mike. That's 202.
Yeah, 202 is what we discussed yesterday. I think the question was about the choice of word more than the overall thing. Whether this paragraph that talks about changes to the presentation includes the term non-substantive. And I heard from Nate very strongly prefers to retain that word, and I heard some concerns about the inclusion of the word, but I don't think this is a major point of contention on the behalf. But obviously, if we can do something better, then I get an opportunity to do that.
So I think the concern that Andrew brought up yesterday, he's not here today, right? Like, but like I think what he brought up was like, non-substantive is like, how do you measure that? Was like really, how do you differentiate that from a substantive change? Was the question. I think we can solve it, like you said. It's probably
We
like a
also
thing.
made the point that these are preferences, so maybe we don't need to have this be absolutely ironclad.
Right. So,
Yeah, Brad's on the screen there saying that open to words that could improve clarity, and I think that's where we're at.
sure.
Chris, you lowered your hand. Was your point made or?
So, just from a mechanical standpoint, it strikes me that, if we're going to discuss this for a while and have issues against it, it's going to be a little bit awkward to evaluate it as a pull request. And I'm wondering if folks would be concerned if we go ahead and merge this PR into the editor's draft, and with an agreement that if it's not going to be in either two things will one of two things will happen. Either we'll get consensus on it before we publish the next working group draft, or we flag it as not yet having consensus if we do publish a new draft. Is that comfortable for folks? Just that I think for a lot of people, especially for folks who aren't familiar with GitHub, it's difficult to find and evaluate this text.
Merge it with a banner that says that.
Or,
It'll be merged into the editor's
Right.
copy before publication.
Right. I mean,
and that's,
to be clear, we can put that banner on the entire draft. Nothing in the draft currently has consensus.
I don't know. I don't want to
at
flag
hands,
one.
you know how you wanted to handle this.
Chris, go ahead first.
Thank you. Yes, sorry, I couldn't reply earlier. I was juggling too many open windows. So I noticed, I think somebody in GitHub, Tyler, commented about verbatim and asked a question, and I think in doing so sort of suggests whether the provisions that we've included around translation should be sort of qualified as like verbatim translations. And I think this perhaps points to perhaps needing a bit more clarity around what we mean by non-substantive as well. So that comment, I think, came in on, I've lost track of it, on the pull request to remove verbatim, which was, I forget which number.
Yeah, I think we just did a quick poll yesterday, Chris, to see if you want to keep it or not. But like personally, to me, like verbatim translation doesn't make sense. Right?
Exactly.
Like it's kind of contradictory to
Right.
say that. But if you want to raise an issue, Chris, like please go ahead and put it in and we can talk over it. But, sure.
Yeah, I'm just relaying Tyler really at this point.
Thank you. Laurent?
Thanks. Yes, yesterday I think it was Erin who asked for a definition of summaries.
Can you speak up a bit?
Okay. Erin was, I think, asking for a definition of summaries. And when we Erin read that, summaries. And
Nick?
read that.
Nick?
Yeah.
Okay. When we read, there is a one sentence paragraph about summaries, no definition and no relationship with non-substantive excerpts, etc. So there will be something to, maybe not to define explicitly, but maybe to highlight the relationship between what is an excerpt, what is a substantive change, and what is a summary. It's not clear.
Leonard?
So I wanted to get back to the logistics. I wonder if it might be better, given that this is still at least slightly controversial, rather than merging it into the editor's draft, could we do it as a specific, because we don't really have a PR of just this against a current draft. That might be easier to edit as well. So
That's what this is.
right?
This is a PR against the current draft.
Of the current draft?
Yes.
I thinking through it, I'm wondering if maybe we should just proactively go and label every section as this section does not have consensus yet, just because there's so many sensitivities around
Put
this.
a banner on the top of the document that basically says this entire document.
We'll take that to discuss with the editors to try and clarify that.
Thanks. Mike?
So, at the risk of blowing anything up, this explicitly excludes the use of summaries. Do we want content owners to be able to express that they are willing to be included in summaries?
Go ahead and propose a new vocabulary term if you would like to do that.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
So you're saying where someone wants to opt out of training, but opt into kind of full AI search?
Yeah.
Thanks. Nick?
Yeah, I agree with Mike. I think there's probably a really strong need for this sort of preference of not training, but still being included in search results and things like RAG. The other point I wanted to make is that verbatim is pretty challenging here to define, because there could be things like encoding changes. Is that verbatim if someone does escaping of characters and whatnot? I think it's just a challenging word to involve. So I'm happy removing verbatim.
Brad?
Thanks. I think I raised this yesterday, but it was the end of the day and I left, and I think we were all running out of steam. The last sentence and the condition that it's okay to use the content for training AI models as long as the outputs are only used in accordance with the above conditions. In other words, you can train a whole model as long as the use of the content in relation to that model is somehow restricted in terms of the way that the output works. That feels like it goes much further than it needs to go. I feel like what we were aiming for here is, if you want to be in search, then you've got to be okay with your content being used to train things or be processed in accordance or with the extent to the extent that is necessary to provide the sort of product that you are saying you're okay with being a part of. This goes further than that. This says that that a model can be trained using your content, but it just might kind of have a guardrail on it in relation to that specific content. And that's I think a material step away from just saying I'm going to allow my content to be used solely to the extent necessary to provide the service that I'm opting into.
So Brad, playing back the discussion we had, in my mind, I think the place we arrived at was the expectation is that the content can be used to train a model, but that model has constraints on its use. It can only be used for that search service. And I would agree that this sentence could say that in a better way, but it sounds like you're going in a different direction.
Yeah, well, maybe if I was presented with saying it in a different way, I might be like, okay, that could be fine. But here's just stepping backwards for a second, right? So there's publishers and search obviously have a sort of like a symbiotic relationship here. You know, publishers need search for referral traffic. There's a strong incentive / pressure to say okay to search because you need that. Companies that are providing search are also building models. They get access to content for building those models by virtue of the fact that they are search providers. This gives them a tremendous amount of power to build models that maybe other companies that are building models don't have, because they don't have the ability to say we need, to have access to that level of content. I think we need to just kind of have that balance in mind, that when we're providing content for search, we only want it to be used for search, and we only want it to be used for AI processing in relation to the provision of that search service, period. I don't think that it's fair or right that we are sort of giving up or saying yes to anything more than that. And this sentence implies that there is something more than that, as long as there is some safeguard built into the output side of whatever model they are building using the content that they wouldn't otherwise have had access to if they weren't a search provider.
Okay.
Does
So
that make
Brad,
sense?
I don't think you do diverge from where we went yesterday. I hear a lot of commonality between what you're saying and what Nate was saying yesterday. And I think that this is the intent here. It's just not perfectly captured yet.
Martin, just skip ahead and talk. We'll let Justin go next, but if you have some thoughts, just talk about it.
I'm going to
was gonna
refresh
say,
through the dance.
I recognize Brad's concern, and the intent of this was to do exactly what Brad was requesting now, and I think that was the agreement in the room. I've put a small tweak to the language here that's now on screen. Does that help, Brad?
It's better. I think maybe if we said training of AI models required for the provision of the search service that is used subject to that. So it's sort of the AI models. I want to make sure that this is an AI model that.
I want to get to the substance of this, though.
But
right?
yes.
But
yes, if I think you've heard what I'm saying. If you say that that's what you want to convey, then yes. I don't think we have to find the exact language right now.
Right. And I think there are a lot of ways. Martin's found one way to express it, but I think part of it, you want to make sure that the model that is trained with this data, if it's trained under this permission, the permission only applies if, or the preference only applies if that model is exclusively used to provide that search service.
Yeah, I like words that say things like "to the extent" and yes, that sounds like you're hearing what I'm saying.
Okay.
Yeah.
We can work on the language.
My understanding is that was the substance of the agreement that was reached today. It's just that we need to be better about spelling it out precisely. And when I said outputs, my thinking was outputs was both the training of the model as an output and the outputs of that model in its use. But that was insufficiently precise. I agree. And so we'll iterate on the exact wording. But as long as we agree on the substance, I think we can do the editorial work to make it clearer.
So, just before you go, Justin, right? So maybe mistakes, can we keep track of that as a separate issue?
Sure.
Instead of keeping this pending and keeping all this
I think that's what Mark was getting at.
That's the intent, is merge this, and then it's easier to create individual issues against the text in the current editor's draft.
Yeah, thanks. Justin?
I like the use of non-substantive now, so thank you for that change. I think we're getting closer. 2 items. it's important that non-substantive means that the material meaning of the original work is not modified. I don't think this text covers that. Hence the word excerpt above. So I think that's important, and I don't feel that it's covering it now. I'm hearing we've had a lot of debate about generative summary, enough so that that allows involvement in generative search, but not generative summary, may be an appropriate preference. That may or may not be part of the conversation of this being tested. But related to the comment on search, I think it's important from a content owner perspective that content owners are not forced, and I'm not saying we're doing this, are not forced in some way. You either allow us to AI or you're out of search in some way. And I don't think we're doing that. I just think that that's an important thing to protect because one organization holds a bit of a gatekeeper role to the content creator. So I'm just being mindful of those creators.
Yeah, and if you look at it specifically, just the first sentence, underlying sentence, this category does not include the use of generative summary. So specifically leaves out the generative summary. So
yeah, and I think that's an important distinction.
Chris, you had a hand up. Did you want to say something? I'm not sure if it's your connectivity flapping.
Yeah, sorry, I've kind of been hovering with my hand up and down. So agree very much with what Brad said. I'm sort of reassured to hear that that's so that you're seeing that as the general consensus in the room as well. Yeah, I think yeah, let's follow up on the wording. I do think it needs a bit of tweaking just to make sure that the use, the training and the application of the AI models is scoped appropriately. But if the approach is to sort of follow that up through GitHub issues, then I'm fine with that. That's good.
Laura?
Yes, I would like to be sure about the scope of the summaries that are there. Are there?
You speak up.
Yeah, is it the summary of one of the results, of the summary of the set of results you are looking for? Is it an AI summary?
Either one of them.
Either one.
In this case. So the question came up in chat about excerpts and the non-substantive changes thing. If you imagine your excerpt is the entire document and your change is to summarize the entire document, that would be a non-substantive change provided that the summary was accurate. But I think the way we address that is the last sentence of the non-substantive changes paragraph, which is to say that constraints on what can be excerpted, what can be taken, and the size of the thing that can be taken constrain what can be extracted from the document, and then that further constrains what the modifications can be. If you can only take one sentence, then you can't summarize anything more than that sentence in presenting it to someone for accessibility purposes.
Yeah, and specifically like doing that before any of this applies, right? Is the
right.
Krishna, like you talked about, like I think like Fabrice talked about this, like your at least the Bing search control that talks about the excerpts lengths and everything. Is that something you can share publicly on this list? On
It's pretty well known for.
No, but if you can just like put it on the WebEx chat, like a URL for that, like so Laurent can look at it.
Max snippets and no snippets.
Okay, anything else here? Of course, there's more here, but for today, Chris, Aaron has her hand up.
Thank you. Yeah, just on that point about existing controls. So I understand from this, what you're sort of referring to, like the no snippet and max snippet and so on. And I think in that context, it may be helpful to try to standardize those things. I think that those are perhaps conventions that exist today, but not necessarily standards document. And so I'm while I don't particularly see Krishna's draft as helpful in terms of AI sort of output and AI sort of usage, I do see it as valuable as a standardized way to communicate between sites and search engines. And so, I think from that point of view, it might be helpful to, to be looking at Krishna's draft as well. And then you've got something that this could refer to rather than referring implicitly to those things. We would have something that, that's more, more of a standardized thing that this could point to.
Good, thanks. Chris, just to make sure, like the stuff I was talking about, the search engine controls, not necessarily Krishna's draft because there's some correlation to it, but it's something that's pre-existing.
Oh, you say that there is an existing thing for search engine controls.
There's people stuff used to instruct like the search engines, like what kind of snippets are allowed and stuff like that, how long it can be and things like that. So
And I think we're going to see an issue about that. So yeah.
Right, okay.
Yeah. Forgive me if we're supposed to only be focusing on the non-substantive paragraph, but the bullet point that says only excerpts from the asset are displayed would prohibit the display of anything that is not an excerpt from the asset.
Right.
Like a color, a link to another asset, words not drawn from the asset in any way. I really feel like these ways of phrasing things that are so restrictive that just say only X is allowed are too narrow and inflexible given the way this needs to work.
So one reading of the intent here is when excerpts of the asset are displayed, they are used only to assist you in evaluating the relevance of the result. And it sounds like that might address your concern.
It would, yeah.
I guess the question is that the intent, and is everybody comfortable with that?
Happy to change.
This English thing is tricky.
I think. Given is your thing on the same point, or like you want to wait till?
It's a bigger,
Okay, so just we'll wait for like Mark to make the hot fix and then.
I have another Nick, but let me know if I should just be making edits in the GitHub.
We're going to look at this real quick and try and resolve that one you just raised real quick first, I think. If I can find it.
You might, yeah, okay. You might get better.
So we're supposed to be just.
When excerpts from the asset are displayed, they are only used to assist users in evaluating the relevance of the result. Is that what you just said, Mark?
Roughly, yeah. Is that closer, Aaron?
I still think only is a problem. Like when excerpts from the asset are displayed, they are used to assist or they are intended to assist. They are for the purpose of assisting, but like no operator of a platform can control how a user actually uses something.
Yeah.
And it like putting language in there that implies that responsibility is just a doorway to complaints and disputes and I think unhelpful.
Right.
Excerpts from the asset may be displayed to assist users. ...
May is a little.
It is permissive. It's saying you don't have to have an excerpt, but you can.
I agree about
It
only.
needs to be a condition.
Why?
The structure of the thing, if we.
This
Yeah,
category
I mean-
of use only applies under the following conditions.
So the only and condition is already there. Saying here is a permission is not saying anything about a condition in which the permission doesn't apply. So you may do X, doesn't say you may also do Y, you may also do Z.
It doesn't restrict you from doing Y and Z.
Right, but this says this category of use only applies under the following conditions. You are doing Y. It's already baked in.
You're suggesting get rid of only.
Yeah.
I mean, that seems perfectly reasonable.
I think
Okay.
that's fine.
Yeah.
Sorry, Leonard, please
I'm
speak to the.
Sorry, I'm sorry. I was asking if she only wanted to get rid of the word only. She implied that that was okay. And so we were just then sort of hemming and hawing about that, but I think that would be a recommendation would be to just remove the word only.
From the top.
From the sentence that
Underline.
says the category of use only applies.
What about the second bullet?
Yeah, it's the second bullet.
Oh,
where I
I'm
think it's
sorry.
the problem.
Yeah.
I could remove only from the top as well. I think that would be fine.
I think it makes sense to remove it from both. Sorry. If you're removing it from the second one, then the top one as well.
I would object
I
to
would-
removing it from the top one. I'm sorry.
Okay.
If I were to,
I don't know if we're doing queuing or what, but
Yeah, just, yeah, so, Kevin, did you want to talk or you want to wait?
Well, actually, now I'm not sure this makes sense. When excerpts from the asset are displayed, they are only used, as Aaron notes. They can't control what the user is using it for.
Yeah.
And so wouldn't the only better fit when excerpts from the asset are displayed only to assist users? So the purpose of displaying the excerpt is only to assist the user.
I think the proposal on the table is remove the word only because
Oh,
there's a
complete.
word, yeah, because the word only appears in the overarching condition on the top. So it's just like they are used. It's like, I think Martin is making a change.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that sentence means then.
so
Yeah, I'm struggling a little bit as well.
I don't want to get too far into the weeds here.
Chris, go ahead and say your thing.
thanks. I just wanted to ask Erin a sort of clarifying question. Is your concern that the only is that we can't put requirements essentially on how users sort of make use of the output, that's been displayed, or is it that you're wanting to enable some other kind of usage or processing that we should
No, it's-
really be we should be enumerating as well here,
It's the former.
right? Because that part I agree with. My concern is that removing restrictions opens the door to other kinds of usages that we would need to talk about, but clarifying for that former purpose seems perfectly fine to me.
Then excerpts are displayed only to assist users. Wouldn't that work?
It
I
would
don't
for
think
me.
you need
Yeah.
the word only in that case, Kevin. You could drop the word only again.
Well,
If that's acceptable to,
but you don't want to condition the category on having to show an excerpt.
right.
You always have to have a snippet. Somebody knows snippets, that means they are no longer in this preference.
Well, it's a semantic thing, right? So it's that if assets are only displayed, assets are displayed only
Well,
to assist the.
so I think maybe we need to go away and think about this a bit more because, even in the current spelling here without the word only, this category of use only applies under the following conditions. Excerpts from the asset are displayed.
Yeah.
Right.
Leonard, if
Then
you,
the word only should be
when
removed
excerpts.
from the top section.
Yeah, so I put a proposal in both chat and also against the PR.
I don't mind Leonard's one. If
Sorry?
If someone want to read it out?
Yeah, so I changed it to when excerpts from the asset are displayed, they serve to assist users in evaluating the relevance of the result.
That's more along the lines of what I originally was talking about. Yeah.
Right.
I think
Exactly.
when is the important part there?
I do have a different suggestion. I was thinking excerpts from the asset can be displayed to assist users. Kind of makes it like,
Give us another condition.
Right.
what?
Right. We're getting to wordsmithing again.
Yeah.
So Martin, why don't you incorporate Leonard's suggestion there? And we'll let this sit for a little while and see how people percolate with it.
Chris?
You're getting good at this.
I am.
Sorry, that's an old hand. Sorry.
Karen?
Yeah, I think saying that a trained model is an output of a use is going to have ramifications across the vocabulary that are bad, and that we should not, like, there's a way to scope in limitations on model usage without defining them as an output, because that I think is more clearly understood to mean just like the inference time consequence output.
Can you suggest text, Aaron?
Yeah.
Because we discussed this, we understand the intent, but we
Yeah,
recognize
we left this in a place where we know that this sentence needs work. It's just, and I think we really intended that the way to spell it is definitely something we need to go away and think about.
Yeah, I might have to do that too, because rewriting an imply could be difficult. I also have concerns about implies a preference, like, and that implication be broken. So I think that whole paragraph needs reworking, and I can think about that.
And I'm hoping what we can do is have a relatively lightweight process where a lot of this is editorial suggestions. And we'll rely on the editors to try and reflect what they've heard as the agreements and the tenor of the discussion we've had so far.
and we'll give people a chance to review any
Exactly.
editorial changes.
And we'll go through a couple of iterations, and hopefully we'll be in a place that then we can go and do a consensus call.
Brad, is your concern the same as you raised before, or some response to what Erin said?
No, it's the same.
Okay.
Chris?
So at the risk of blowing this whole thing up entirely, like there's a I think a very valid point being made in the chat here, which is we don't actually have a kind of a good definition of what search is. Like if you look at to the very top of the definition, we just assume that there's common knowledge of like this is what a search application is. And Kevin's comment talks about, well, do we have a way of sort of meaningfully distinguishing this from other kinds of applications, you know, such as, you know, the various examples of sort of chatbot type interfaces that he gives.
I mean, the first sentence is an attempt to address exactly that point.
Directs
Your
users to
proposal
location.
included exactly that language. I'm not sure why you're saying that we don't have a definition. I think that's a definition.
Which is the definition?
The search category, the definition you're pointing at.
The use of one or more assets in a search application that directs. Yeah.
But that's sort of, I think what people are pointing out is that that's a little bit circular. Your definition of the search category depends on a definition of search application that is.
Well, it is.
There is one.
It's in
It's
the
further up.
underlying original draft.
Directs users to the location of those assets.
So could you drop the word search there and just say the search category covers the use of assets in an application that directs users to the location?
That would also work. Yeah.
Drop search there.
Okay.
But regular chat directs me to things all the time.
Absolutely.
So how is that a distinction that defines a search application from?
I think we probably need to wordsmith along something like an application whose primary purpose is.
Well,
We do have a definition of search
Actually-
application.
We do?
Yes.
But I think the question is, do we want to make that?
I'm just asking the
No,
question.
The question is, do we want to make that distinction, or do we want to say that anything that is behaving this way is within the preference, regardless of what the like broader kind of category of the application is?
Then we need to define the behavior very clearly.
Yeah, which
We're doing
we're
that.
trying to do.
We do have a queue.
Yeah, we do. And in section 2, Kevin, there's like a definition. If you don't like it, make a proposal.
Okay.
Thanks. Next is Nate.
Yeah, to be clear, like in the conventions and definitions, there is a definition of search application. It's not part of the search category here.
And that one, there is still the issue that it's so broad that it basically, because it's just like anything that enables you to load something in a database, which is like literally anything on the web, basically, right? But like there is that definition.
Yeah, and that's what I meant by the section 2, right? Like it's there, and if you don't like it, you can change it.
We can file an issue. Yeah.
Timid robot?
I guess timid robot. I'm wondering if it matters whether it's like whether whatever application it is, people decide it is a search or it is not a search, if the behavior that this defines is being met. Like that. I don't know, it seems like the thing that's trying to be avoided is the like either not sending people to the origin or to the asset, or generative content that changes the meaning of the asset or misrepresents the meaning of the asset. And this like tackles that, solves that. And so I don't know that it being classified as search or not. I'm wondering why that matters.
Kevin?
So this goes back to the point that Mike was making earlier and that I was making yesterday, which is whether or not publishers want to be able to enable RAG that follows conditions like these. And so to reframe that question, do we want an exception like this that conditions use of the asset on particular requirements around how it is displayed to be an exception for both training and RAG? Do you want the option to be able to say, I don't mind RAG if you're doing this?
Right, but that's not this discussion. That's the kind of the use. We've called that inference. We've called it use. We've called it RAG. We need proposals in that space.
No, I'm saying this could this. Don't make this the search exception. Make this the exception for use of assets that display stuff like this, and then that can apply to either or both the RAG or train.
I think the intent is like there's people who want one or the other, so I don't think we can combine them. I think that's why we had to leave it till later, like to figure it out. Because I think from the people who want to express their preferences, at least there's a clear indication people would say one yes to one and not to other.
Then I think it's incumbent on them to be able to define the difference.
Correct. Like, and that's why people are talking about the AIUs. It got pulled out because we can get consensus on it, but we do need to spend time on it. But it's certainly not the same thing. Is the point? Yeah. So Nate?
To Timid Robot's point, one way, and I'm not wedded to this, and maybe I haven't even thought it through fully, but yeah, defining search application, you could just say the use of one or more assets to direct users to the location where those assets were retrieved, and because search application is so broad, like what work is search application doing there? Maybe I'm missing something, but it's so broad that it's basically just any application.
You're talking about the definition in section 2 at this point?
Or no, I'm talking about the first line that's kind of above where it says this category only applies. Like if you go up before the red, is that yellow part still in there? I think it is, right?
It is.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. You could modify that line to just say the use of one or more assets to direct users to the location of those assets or whatever. Can't quite read how the red line.
But I think that what I heard was that could be interpreted to significantly broaden the application of this. So for example, if you had a chat application on your laptop that when it displays a link, gave you the option to summarize that link, would this be a control that applies to that now?
I mean, what work is the search application doing to not include that as a practical matter right now? I don't know.
Our current definition, yeah. Well, so, from all of our current discussions, I think our intent is to make this about internet search engines. Yeah. We can do a better job of reflecting that, I think.
Maybe the search application definition that needs refining. I don't know.
I personally, I tend to agree.
Do we need to include a mention of queries?
Well, let's go brainstorm about it. My suggestion would be something like primary purpose, because that's a good distinction between this and other secondary purposes.
Sorry, Mark, I didn't really hear you there.
Sorry?
Can you repeat it? I didn't really hear you.
My personal suggestion would be to concentrate on a definition that includes a phrase like primary purpose, because that's a good way to distinguish between other applications that happen to follow links. Caleb?
I think one piece of work that the search application is doing in that sentence is making space for the ranking bit. Right? You need a way to consider and discard assets in the search application, or to rank them such that, which means not linking to them. And so just making this bit say it has to direct it to the asset to qualify for this exception leaves all of that out.
So I'm just going to point out that it's very hard as an editor to manage this because we've jumped from one issue to another without making any resolution on the other items.
Mm.
And this sort of jumping around makes it very difficult for me to do anything.
Yeah, I think I would like us to get into a state where this text is in the editor's draft, and we even perhaps refer to the open issues in different parts of the editor's draft. I know that that's something we don't love doing, but
I really don't like doing that.
it might help people.
I think it would hurt more than it would help.
We'll see.
Timid robot.
Timid robot, to my earlier point about kind of this doesn't matter if it's a primary search application or not. The last paragraph restricts any kind of AI building or training or whatnot to search. And so like someone wouldn't be able to, like, that excludes like a generic kind of like chat interface that provides results. Right? Like it's, kind of to address people's kind of concerns about RAG, like the RAGs that are, kind of updating models or creating like hybrid models, et cetera, from the source assets, they would only qualify for this preference if their primary thing was, if they were only doing search because of that last paragraph.
Right. I think it was Mark's proposal as well, like used to, but I think Mark, you intended to do it in section 2, right? In the definition of the search application as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like we're getting to diminishing returns here.
Kevin and Erin, if you want to make a quick comment.
Well, I was gonna compound the problem by pointing out something else, so.
Well, if it's substantive, it'd be good to talk about it in this room. If it's editorial, or how we're wording things.
Yeah, I don't think it's just a like language. I don't think we can solve it with language in this structure, but can you scroll up to defines what this category is?
Sorry, I didn't hear a whole bit of what you said because there was a lot of coughing.
Can you scroll up to the sentence that says what this category is before we then get to the conditions on it?
This one right here?
There we go. Yeah. So what this is saying, before we get to any other condition or statement about the category, is that the search application must direct users to the location of the asset. Which means that if the asset never ranks high enough to be displayed to a user, then it cannot be indexed at all. And you cannot index something unless you know already that you will be showing it, which fundamentally defeats the whole ability to use assets.
So perhaps an application that might direct users to the location, or
I have text in the chat if anyone wants to read that I think addresses these concerns rather than just trying to come up with adversarial readings.
I think, is that language, and I'm sorry, I'm trying to follow both the talking and the chat.
Yeah, I know, it's difficult.
But is that language the first introduction sentence that defines the overall category, or is it in that later paragraphs?
No. So I put it The very last message in the chat at this moment is a suggestion for an a replacement for that first sentence. But I believe it's the concerns that you have, which is use of an asset in applications. The primary purpose of that application is to take user queries, select assets appropriate to those queries, and direct users to the location of those assets.
I think this is an improvement, but does every search application have to start with a user query? Can the user say, like, you know me, you know when I come to this, I want links to interesting articles, and I'm going to do that 5 times a day without each time saying, give me a link to an interesting article.
I think you can frame that as a search query. I think that's taking a pretty fine reading of this one. I think that's if you want to look for problems in this language,
I mean,
you're always going to find them,
that's what we're here for.
right? But that seems like stretching it a bit.
I don't, because we distinguish between things that are query based and query-less. And without focusing too much on the products of any one particular company, like this would mean that things can't be in Google News. Because the homepage of Google News is not a query, it is here's what's in the news.
So you cannot possibly frame something like Google News as having an implicit query?
I mean, if we want to say that there can be implicit queries where the user has not actually done anything but visit the application,
context.
I feel like we're kind of blowing, then why have a reference to query at all?
What about we take out the word user? I mean, to me, that your issue is around users, not around queries. It sounds.
No, I think these applications have users. I'm pretty comfortable with a limitation that the application should be serving like just human beings rather than, and the intermediate processing is taken care of by a later explanation. But I do think that query based as the defining characteristic is not entirely the point. And I also feel like the goal here is not to say this is what a search engine has been for however many years, and so we will only permit the things that look exactly like that. I think the goal is to say that when you are using the asset in a way that helps people find the asset and doesn't do other stuff with it that we think is inappropriate, that you get to do that, whether or not you're a chat application or a search engine or the next thing that comes along that we aren't predicting yet.
Yeah, okay, I see your point. Give me something I can use though.
I did. We just voted against
just said it.
I mean, I think there's a way to do this, which is the draft I submitted. And I don't know another way, but I can try to come up with another one.
Yeah, so, I think you have a host of other problems with that text.
Martin, did you want to talk about a different point? I think we should just go through and hear from everybody and then we come back to it. Glenn? Glenn?
Oh, sorry, I did think it was that high in the queue. I thought it was far lower in the queue, but I'll go. I want to come in this conversation. What I just heard, if we pull back query and we change this, effectively any content that is dynamically generated for presentation would fall into this category now. That would include electronic program guides when you go to a streaming service and it says, here's movies you can watch. Are we making it so expansive that it becomes, it's almost the category of, if done with a computer? Because it seems like, I think where we were with search was we had a classic use case we were addressing. And I think your point is well taken that there are future use cases that we don't understand that we may want to support. But I'm wondering if the path isn't to have classic search that we sort of understand today defined, and then we have a separate category for those other things that are not as well defined, because by their very nature of being undefined, we don't know their boundaries and conditions that we want to talk about. But for search, classic search that is, I think we do. Does that help?
I think I don't think there's a problem with being over expansive if all we're talking about are things like a program guide that has the title of a show and then like tells you where and when to watch it. I don't think that's what anybody's concerned about trying to exclude from this category.
So we've got a queue, so let's.
I do worry that it is. It's a feedback on that comment back. I worry that EPGs today, classic EPGs don't have things, but expanded EPGs could. And so I would be more comfortable keeping classic search in its own category because I understand what that is. Expanded use case search, not comfortable pulling in like this.
But isn't the like expanded, sorry, I didn't catch your acronym, expanded information captured by the other conditions in the category?
The answer is I don't know because I haven't evaluated all the boundary conditions with that expanded state. Again, with classic search, it's a well discussed topic space, and so I know the concerns and the issues that have to be dealt with, and so I can evaluate this against that. With the other expanded scope, I can't yet without extensive thinking through all the cases.
Okay,
that's why I'm uncomfortable with it.
But that sounds like you've got homework now. Go and think through it.
No, I disagree. I think we all suffer from that problem that we know what classic search looks and feels like, and it's partly true here. If we expand this, then we are opening up a can of worms. Essentially, like I said, the extreme version of this is done with a computer, and that opens up a lot of cases which we have never considered or discussed as a community or as a room.
That's good. Thank you, Nate.
I put a suggestion in the chat that just basically took out the query part. I did that quickly. I wonder if anyone has thoughts on that, including any publishers or anything, because I do take the point about like Google Discover, for instance. So I do take that point.
Yeah, and news and a bunch of other things that implicitly do these sorts of things. I mean, even like the Facebook newsfeed. Right.
Warren?
Yeah, I mean, Glenn triggered me on something. So when you triggered me on all sorts of things, buddy, but when I go to, for example, Netflix, and it suggests because it has learnt my preferences over time, do you view that as a query or not? I mean, it is over time. I have provided more information. It has learnt my preferences.
Or a map application
Or a map
that you're walking down the street and it says, by the way, Warren, I know you like cappuccinos. Here's a great cappuccino shop. Is that a query? I don't know. That to me, that's dynamically created content based upon knowledge of the entity I'm interacting with. It's not a search in many ways.
Possibly not, but it is something that I would like to continue to use and to get better. And so it's definitely not leaderhood, but it is something which I think is of value to the person using it.
Let me be clear. I'm not trying to cut it out. What I'm identifying is that I think what we have is a separate case that we should capture as a preference that you can express. I don't.
Thank you. Thanks. Timid Robot?
Timid Robot, I'm confused about what we're trying to solve for. I thought we were trying to solve ensuring users are brought to the original content versus extracting that content and keeping users away from it. And that we're trying to avoid misrepresenting content. You know, that a news headline gets changed and the whole thing gets changed due to a poor word choice. I didn't think we were trying to create like a little early aughts bubble for ourselves, like to preserve an experience in time, but to address these issues with content and assets or whatever we want to call them. I still fail to see why, if the content is being respected in the way that this category requires, why there's any issue kind of what the context of that use is, right? Like if it's bringing users to the original content and it's not misrepresenting that content, like if that's been solved, aren't we happy? Thank you.
Meredith?
I think
pretty similar to what the robot was saying, but also I think when we actually get the usability of these preferences out in the wild, people who want their content to be findable, the search content that includes the rankings and the here's other content related to what you might want, is in that bucket. And so if we're making choices where we expect people to pick findability as a bucket, I think it makes sense to include more than just, 2010 search.
Do you think that Nate's definition fails on that measure?
No, I think it succeeds. This is
Yeah. Okay, good. Then there's a lot of negativity floating around, and I just wanted to
I think it's
sort of. I think it's good.
Yeah.
I think it's.
I might
excellent.
take out primary, but I think it's good.
Thanks. Brad?
Yeah, so I get the concern and maybe some of the confusion around why publishers might not necessarily want an expansive definition. I think there's a couple of things. The first thing is that if we're thinking about this in the sort of classic search context where there is something sort of like search plus, that there's a search engine, and then the search engine also recommends content for you in various ways. So there's the sort of pull, and then there's the push. It really is going to depend on the party doing that, whether or not there is actual benefit for the publisher. It depends how it's presented. There are some news aggregation services that may fall into this category that are not particularly helpful for publishers. There is the question of whether publishers, ultimately, it's in their interest to be pushing more towards building direct relationships with end users as opposed to kind of being constantly sucked into aggregation or intermediary type relationships. And I think that while some might see that as a foot shooting inclination, I think it also is kind of a longer term self-preservation inclination in a world where, kind of being reliant on intermediaries for your survival hasn't necessarily served the news industry that well. So it's a bit more complicated than just saying, well, why wouldn't publishers just want, their stuff to appear in every sort of way in which people could then find the path back to them? I think yes, generally, but there are going to be a lot of instances where they don't. So I don't know if that. I'm not saying that I disagree with Nate's suggestion. I think it's responsive to the question that's raised, but I do think it needs more thought as to how expansive we want this category to actually be to solve for what we want it to solve for.
Thanks. Glenn, did you already say your part?
I did, but I took my hand down just a second ago.
Yeah. Can we talk about this primary purpose?
Yeah, that's what I'd like to focus on. I'm hearing a fair amount of support, or at least willingness to consider something like what Nate suggested. I put up because I heard a little pushback on primary purpose, so I did another version in the chat which is without the primary purpose qualifier. Can we talk through primary purpose for a few minutes and see if we need that or not?
Nick, is it related?
Yeah, it's related. So I'm happy with starting with what Nate is presenting. I think the risk here and where we're risking overlapping is that classic search with queries is kind of expanding into this chat window world, and we're risking the RAG world where you're starting with a chat interface that can act like search, and there's potentially an overlap there. And that's the boundary I think we need to draw with this text, is from search that also has capabilities of short summarization and whatnot to full kind of chatbot views that can do search-like functionalities. And so I think people will have different preferences for these two, and that's where I think we should be careful drawing the line. I don't, unfortunately, have text.
Nate?
So first of all, I'll say I'm sensitive to all the concerns Brad raised, and I do want to think about those more. I put this forward as a good faith effort to try to just find a path forward. I do think primary purpose is important here, though, because if we don't have primary purpose, then all it says is an application that's use of an asset in an application, and that's qualified by saying that selects and directs users to the location of those assets. All it means is that somewhere in that application, there has to be a function of that application that performs this sort of search function, but that could be like 1% of the application, and then 99% could be other. And then we're using that asset in that because the applies to the application, not to the act of selecting assets and directing users to location of those assets. If that makes sense, it effectively gets at this concern. It's just saying, so you need that primary purpose to be like, that's really what this application is about, not just some random feature that was tacked on in order to qualify for this category.
Timid robot?
Name is Timid Robot. I don't think we can identify a commercial application whose primary purpose is search. I think the primary purpose is ad impressions. The primary purpose is surveillance capitalism. No, but seriously, right? Like, I think this idea of like locking it into, like, I worry that we are not grounded in reality here. And again, I think that when it comes to things like, does a chat program qualify for this category? I think that's a really important question, not because we need to discern between different applications, but we need to protect the use of the content. And that is the goal, is protecting kind of the agency of the content holder and how that content is used, both vis-a-vis visits and representation of that content. Yeah, thank you.
Erin?
Yeah, just to respond to the concern Nate raised, I think the rest of the definition of the category is to address that issue. So like the introductory sentence can be broader, which then says, the use of the asset is conditioned on the following things. And so that's why I feel like we don't need to be very restrictive about the nature of the application, because the nature of the use is more specified.
Good.
I was just gonna say that I understand where Nate's trying to go with the primary purpose, but I think given what Tim and Robot said, and which I agree with, is probably another way to say that, or a better way to say, because the primary purpose could be, any number. I mean, it's supposed to be primary, but there's any number of things that this could be used for. So yeah, if there's I don't know if removing it is the answer, but maybe phrasing it another way or finding what the real intent of that is.
Or who the primary purpose is for.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got in line to say, I think, Timid Robot, your point is like extremely cynical in a way. So the way I thought about it is that somebody who consumes this preference is probably going to be self-classifying themselves as the primary purpose being searched, right? Like it's at least how I thought about it, which is like the other angle into this. So assuming that's the angle we are going into, I like the formulation with primary purpose in it, right? Like, but I hear you, but I think it's probably outside our scope to kind of talk about it that way. Nate?
Yeah, I am I'm sensitive to both Aaron and Timid Robot's point. I think that maybe it's better to apply the primary purpose to the use, because that's the thing that we care about, and not to the application. To address, maybe that would address Timid Robot's point. Now, as to whether or not later on, the concern is that the first, if the first, I think that in any sort of, when you're trying to retroactively interpret any sort of legislation or anything, like the first line of text is important, does a lot of work. And if the first line is everything, and then we're going to narrow everything, I think that's different than I just think it should be a little bit more defined than that. And I guess that maybe that's not, maybe it could just, I don't know. I will think about that, but I think that it's you can't just start off by saying literally everything and then let's narrow that down.
Kathy.
I know that there was a reference to search application before, and is leveraging, I know that there's, and Suresh, you raised this very issue. The search application in this December draft is already defined, and I know that this group can also tweak that definition, but keeping the search application here, would that like help scope this better? In contouring and bringing more clarity. I actually really appreciated Nate's points as well. So I wonder if that would like help bring a bit more clarity to the definition in a way that doesn't confuse the industry.
So, Chris.
I mean, it also should just a loophole, right? So if you say for primary purpose is one thing, it's really something else. So it's offered. That's fine. If there's another way to say it, then.
Sorry?
What does it not say primary purpose?
I don't know. You're the editor.
Because that's not what I have in my edit buffer.
I think that was Nate's suggestion, right? So it's probably too new.
Is this usually when we take a break?
Yeah, we're about to take a break. I think we are getting to diminishing returns. I do think we need to get some text out there to let people think about it.
I did put a suggestion in.
Okay.
That may have got lost. Is that on the pull request?
Last thing in the chat right now.
Oh.
Okay. Let's look at that suggestion, talk about it, and then we're going to take a break. So talk us through it.
So to address the concern that search application is the whole thing kind of out independent of the specific like presentation of the assets, instead of talking about a search application, we would just be talking about search results and defining those results as like the links, which are directing users to the result, and the associated content that like kind of brings in some of this idea that there's other stuff that can be used to give context and help understand, but that is all still like in service of directing users to the location of the assets.
So I think it depends a lot on your drafting, because if you just say use of an asset in search results, one of the readings of that is that it's only if it shows up. We get back to that problem.
In search results and the processing to enable search results.
Right. I think we need more than
Yeah.
the idea here. We need the text.
Yeah.
So,
but it
potentially
potentially promising. Maybe during the break, work on something. Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and break for now. Let's come back in 15 minutes at 11, and we'll try and if we do have a proposal there, we'll talk about it. Otherwise, we'll move on to the training term.
I've also proposed a change to the final paragraph that I think is responsive to some of the discussions that were had here.
So folks, take a look at that on the
Take a
break
look at that as well.
Yep. Okay. And Martin, is this what you intend in that's your current reading? The first sentence?
If y'all are amenable.
I still have primary purpose in my edit buffer.
Oh, something's not right.
Oh, no, I don't.
Yeah, okay.
We'll be back in 16 minutes at 11.
I think something happened with That's the impression you already got, right?
Yeah. I just wanted to make sure I understood.
I wasn't sure whether I properly communicated.
Christopher.
That's why we have.
Christopher.
That's it. Thanks.
Starting now.
Honesty panel.
Okay, everybody, let's get started. Right?
Sorry.
I just, but then like climbing under desk, once I did that.
That's very.
Dance for us as penance.
To New York.
The dancing will continue until consensus is.
I do believe that forcing people to dance will violate the IETF code of conduct.
We have a special exception. All right, come on, let's go. So do we have any further immediate substantive thoughts or concrete proposals about this search text? Or can we take it off to the list to allow people, gentlemen, to simmer?
Can you define
You're out of order.
What is whole courtroom's out of order?
It's that time of the meeting where everybody gets a little bit silly. Sometimes that time is on the first day, but today is our time. Okay, let's put a pin in this for now then. Let it simmer. Next up, we were discussing the towering majesty that is the foundation model term, formerly known as the foundation model term. And I believe came to a place where, despite this comment, we selected this text B.
There is a pull request for this if you.
What's the PR?
Geez. Give me a minute.
2SM?
Yeah. Now, there's more to this pull request, unfortunately, than just the definition, because I had to do some housekeeping.
But this is the meat of it, correct?
That is the meat of it.
So get rid of all that fine text, and we have this very simple. The act of using an asset in the production or refinement of the weights of an AI model that can generate content in one or more modalities, text, image, audio, etc. And we are renaming the category to AI training.
AI model
It's
training.
a AI model.
Sorry, AI model training. Thank you.
Now, there was discussion about removing the phrase weights of, the weights of, which I think is a implication that would not necessarily harm the definition. Make that change if there's no objections to that, but I wanted to test the waters.
Yeah, there was a counter proposal to use parameters, right? I don't know who made that proposal.
I did, but I think the general sense was that just removing that.
This level of specificity doesn't add anything to the definition.
Exactly.
Is that a controversial statement? Do we have any hands?
Yeah, Tom.
Is the idea that this would
Speak up, speak up.
is the idea that this would include fine tuning, and that category is implicit within this.
Refinement.
That's what refinement captures.
Sure. Okay. So then maybe it's still helpful to have that sentence, that short sentence, saying what fine tuning is as part of its thing. I don't know if that's helpful.
Would it also help if it was production, and again, we're getting to wordsmithing here, production or subsequent refinement?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just to emphasize that?
Again, I mean, I'm with you on that. I don't really want to get into the weeds on that particular thing, but I think that would be a helpful addition of like a sentence just to keep in there. But I just recall, obviously.
So I think if you use the word sub, it implies that someone who takes a model from someone else and refines them is not covered by that. And
Well, it's still subsequent.
yeah, I know, but
Doesn't say by the same party.
yeah.
And or subsequent.
I think I like it as is. Simpler the better.
Sure.
Simple.
That
I think
is
the simple form
nice.
is clearer.
Yeah, we often get in trouble when we add extra words.
Justin?
I think what we're trying to avoid is being void for vagueness, which I don't believe we are. If it's specific, then you miss any future things we didn't think of. I think the first line of this is beautiful. Train or fine tune, whatever that fine tuning is. Could be weights, could be parameters, but that's fine tuning. So I like it the way.
Kevin?
Were like specifically you were
sorry, we've got a
deleted line, just to be careful. You were reading the first deleted line. The act of using or train or fine tune was this, the current text is the act of using an asset in the production of maintenance.
I'm also that.
Okay, good.
Sorry,
Kevin.
Didn't catch you. Thank you.
I don't think this is a substantive comment necessarily, in that I think we're all trying to talk about the same thing. I don't think they're trying to draw a distinction between pre-training and post-training or fine-tuning or whatever you want to call it is very useful. I think a definition where we say training is anything that changes the parameters of a model, catches everything, and doesn't try to draw technical distinctions where there really aren't any.
Yeah.
I mean, even the refinement of weights, right?
Right.
You train a model, you're initializing the weights somehow.
Yep. Right.
Pseudo-randomly, let's say, and then you are refining them. And at some point you decide you're done, but there's no, that's all the refinement of weights, right?
I'm wondering. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Any disagreement with that?
I'm wondering if it would be helpful to add kind of a non-normative explanatory note along those lines, something to the effect of, in practice, any use of the asset that has the effect of changing the model is encompassed by this category or something like that.
Would you like me to propose something? All right. Okay.
Nate?
I think Kevin covered it.
Excellent. Very good. So Martin, you'd get a PR or like a
Yeah, where do you want to put that suggestion, Kevin?
Where would be most helpful for you?
Chat?
Where I can find it. If you put it in chat and I can put it in the edit thing straight away. That's
okay. Yeah. I'll stick it somewhere and put it in.
Justin?
Just clarifying, this will cover both the original producer of a model and a third party that may choose to refine.
Yes.
Thank you.
Or someone who's employing LoRa or any of those other techniques that involve the creation of weights.
I'm good with that. Thank you.
I think that's good.
Okay.
I would say we have convergence on that.
Okay. Should I refresh this more?
I removed the off the weights thing.
Okay.
That's all. If Kevin can get me some contextualization, then I will add that.
And I gave you one minor editorial, which I'll include it at your leisure.
See, I'm not looking at that. Yeah, I'm not sure that's right.
It is right. We have to be, whatever word we're going to use should be consistent.
But I don't think it needs, I think this is specifically not consistent.
Why?
So,
eliminate
Sorry, I flagged the word, so in the definition, it says the act of using an asset that can generate content. And my point was that whatever word where you end up using for asset, we generate assets so that we are consistent in the wording. We can't use asset in one place, content in another, or again. Whatever word we pick, it applies in both cases.
Well,
my reason for choosing the word content in this case was to avoid dragging in the definition we have of asset or artifact or whatever it is that we have, right? Because when we're talking about an asset, it's like the whole unit.
Right. Yes. Exactly.
Whereas content in this case is specifically some portion of material, not the whole thing.
Not necessarily. I mean,
well, not necessarily, but
definitely possibly.
This is a narrower thing than the full thing. if you limit this to producing of assets, which is in our definition an entire thing, we miss something. And
Yeah, then we,
choice of
that's,
what-
I get that. Then we ought to define content as well in this case.
Yeah, we do.
We do where?
Text, audio, video.
Right. So we need to do some more explicitly. We can.
We have to be a little, yeah, just.
I think at this stage, we're using IC as a placeholder. We need to go through the entire to see that we're consistent about these things. But
Agreed.
reading that out with regards to individual sentences of the document at this moment is
And
not.
possibly add definitions and so forth and so on. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy to use a different word here, but I don't think we're going to use the same word that we have.
Yeah.
Because the intent is to say you're creating material or something that is not necessarily the same thing.
No, that I totally, I understand what you're trying to accomplish. Let's take it offline.
Yeah.
All right.
That's done.
Yeah, let's move on then to our glorious friend, section 3.2. Where did the issue go? There it is. And yesterday we had, I believe, 2 competing proposals for this as well. And I don't believe we did select one of those as a way to go forward. And I'm wondering where they are hiding. Which was that?
So we're talking
This is
about use.
160, no, 3.2. Not quite yet. So we had this one, 204 and 206.
Right. Let me see if I can find the one where.
I think it's down here.
So 206 is the one that I'm suggesting we
Let's
cover.
trade on.
So this is just a transcription of what Brad suggested, and we moved past that.
Okay.
The 206 takes the present text, Alyssa's suggestion, Brad's suggestion, and tries to take all of the discussion we had yesterday and synthesize that into something that's a little more responsive to all of the concerns that were raised.
Let's do this.
And the diff is very difficult to read on
I'm
this
not going to
one.
look at the
It's probably
diff.
best if
I'm
you
going
get
to hope, and here it is indeed. This is what I want. Make it bigger. The worst thing you can say to a
Synthesis
graphic
160.
designer. And so
3.2.
yeah, I'm looking. 3 to 1 isn't affected. Okay. So let's look through this.
Oh boy, that's taking a while.
Oh, is it? There we go. So this specification provides a set of definitions for different categories of use, plus a system for associating simple preferences to each other. The categories of use in the vocabulary describe concrete, observable outcomes that depend on the use of assets. They seek to avoid describing internal details of implementations or their architecture. This specification only seeks to ensure that preferences can be understood, not provide a means of ensuring that preferences are followed. I feel like we're bearing the lead a bit there, but sure. I like it. Enforcement is not provided by this specification. Preferences do not themselves create rights, obligations, or prohibitions, either in the positive or the negative.
Yeah.
Other mechanisms, technical, legal, contractual, or otherwise, never mind, might enforce adherence to these preferences and thereby determine the consequences of not following a stated preference. An entity that receives usage preferences has a choice about whether to respect the preferences it has discovered. It makes this choice according to the understanding of how the asset is used, how that usage corresponds to the usage categories where preferences have been stated, and the applicable legal context. Historically, entities have used assets for a variety of reasons. This has included a wide array of uses and applications, including safety, advertising, education, scholarship, research, market intelligence, preservation, surveillance, interoperability, and accessibility. These decisions were based on a subjective analysis of pre-existing signals about preferences and an understanding of how the asset would be used in that application. The mechanisms in this document might be more direct than previous ways of expressing preferences, but the same fundamental challenges remain when deciding whether or not to use an asset.
Erin, go for it.
Yeah, just put a suggestion in the chat, but since this is in the first paragraph that's visible right now, since it's that there are no rights, obligations, or prohibitions, and trying to be very like balanced about no obligations in either direction, then I'd suggest then I suggest other mechanisms might enforce adherence or non-adherence.
So
that's a helpful contribution.
Timid robot?
Timid robot. In the same vein, Mark, when you read the last sentence, you added or not, whether or not to use an asset.
My fault.
Well, but perhaps kind of in a similar vein to what was just said, like adding that would be helpful.
Right, keeping it neutral. Martin, take that as a friendly.
Yep. Last sentence. Where is that? Whether?
Almost the very end.
Yep. Thank you.
Leonard?
Yeah, so I just submitted a couple of changes, but one of them I wanted to talk through, which is some of the wording in here doesn't make it clear to whom or to what this text is referring. So, for example, and let's just look at that last line. The same fundamental challenges remain when deciding whether to use an asset, when what is deciding, when who is deciding to use it. Is it the end user? I mean, obviously we know because we wrote this, but there's no, it's missing a, subject, if you will. And there's another place that I also flagged where the same thing is true, where we don't give direction as to who this is being directed at. So I think we need some subjects there.
Do you have a suggestion of how to identify the entity that you're addressing?
In the comments I just sent you, I used the word system because it seemed like the most agnostic, but I am absolutely up for other words.
I think we can take it for granted that these are going to need a couple of passes editorially for English, grammar, clarity, organization.
Brad?
On the last paragraph, is it really accurate to say, and I think this is the implication is that there's historical context that is relevant here. And I wonder if that's correct, because while there has been use of assets historically, we're creating something new. And so are we saying, that these sorts of uses sort of should continue, that I'm not exactly sure what guidance this actually gives.
So I think that the purpose here is to relate it to the context used, including the historical context, not to guide in a sense, but more to caution overreading what this framework is providing.
Yeah, it sort of reads a little bit like that, but if you're saying don't overread this, then it sort of doesn't. Where does it leave the reader? And I don't know if then we're sort of saying, I think we've said so much about this being unenforceable, and now we're sort of saying, and don't overread even what what is unenforceable. I mean, how much further than being unenforceable can you go?
So I think this is kind of the really key paragraph.
No, I think it's actually I'm talking about the last paragraph. But yeah, I mean,
I understand.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, but that's sort of the meat of it. I think it almost feels like you try and over-explain something, and in over-explaining it, you make it a little bit more fuzzy. And I think that the last sentence, in an attempt to be clear, actually makes things more fuzzy.
So I hear you, Brad. I also hear that a number of folks in the room feel that it's important to have text like this.
Yeah.
Chris?
And I hear that I hear the importance of that. I'm not pushing back on the need for it, but I want it to be clear. I mean, because historically entities have used assets for a variety of reasons. They've also used those assets in the absence of preferences. So, I don't want the implication to be like these preferences really shouldn't mean anything to those that have used these assets in the past for a historical context that is now evolved. So that's all. I don't want to oversell what we're doing here. I also don't want to undersell it.
I could see that last paragraph could be rewritten in a way that doesn't lose, the nuance and the examples, but is perhaps a bit crisper.
I think part of what I was attempting to do here was ensure that we weren't too specific about those historical things. I think there have been preferences about how things are used in the past. It's just we've had no good ways of expressing those preferences, and so that's really what it's saying. And acknowledging that the challenges that existed previously in terms of understanding what preferences were persist even when there are means of expressing preferences more clearly.
Brad, doesn't the last sentence kind of go a little bit into what Martin just said, to make it differentiable from what was there before, right? That we are being more direct.
And this is a piece that I took from Alyssa's proposed text and tried to work it in. So if I did so imperfectly, that's on me.
I can work on it a bit.
But yeah.
Thanks, Brad. Chris?
So yeah, I also struggle with this paragraph. I mean, I sort of said yesterday about that. I think the rest of this section reads pretty well to me, and I think that conveys the point about the sort of the surrounding context for this. I think if we want to talk about history, then we need to be a bit more honest about what we're saying, because the recent history suggests that assets have been used with no regard whatsoever for site preferences. And so I think this sort of presents a version of history which is incomplete, and I think is pointing towards the sort of surrounding sort of regulatory context. And I still maintain that that's not really what we should be attempting to do in this document. That's what the kinds of uses for education and research and so on. These are things that have sort of existing provisions that we don't need to. I think this paragraph really, as Brad says, it just adds, I think, confusion to what we're saying, and I think we're better off leaving it out of the document, and because the rest of what we say in this section actually conveys what we do mean.
So Chris, can I ask, would it give you more comfort if we weren't couching this in historical terms, but said something like, in practice, entities have use assets for a variety of reasons and so forth and so on? So try not to relate it to historical, but just to common practice.
No, because my latter point applies, which is it's the surrounding context in which we're working with that defines those things. It's not for us to define those things.
Well, I just know, we've already had a significant amount of discussion around compromise here, and I think that there's been a lot of compromise on this text. So I'd ask you to think carefully about whether, this is something that you just think is not terribly helpful versus you're actively against.
Understood. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Meredith?
So I think two things. One is, I don't know that it's always super helpful to talk about these as not enforceable, because at some level, it's not that they are unenforceable, it's that they aren't self-enforcing, right? Like these aren't, there are going to be ways in which these are, in different contexts, used in an enforcement way. And so saying that it doesn't matter that we don't talk about these exceptions or these times you might not follow them because they're enforceable, leaves aside that at some level people care about these because they think they will be in some way enforced. So I think there's that. The second part is, we could say in here sort of explicitly, if these are used in a enforcement context, if they're used in a way that is binding, they need to take into account law or like other areas in which you would also have a legal obligation not to follow them, because that is the piece that I think is missing here, right? That if these become enforced or enforceable, they're going to conflict with other legal and, in some situations, I think, ethical obligations.
I think the current text says like they don't provide a mechanism to enforce. I don't think we say it's unenforceable, at least in here.
No, but in the discussion, I think people say, well, like it doesn't matter if there's exceptions because they're not enforced, but they I think will be.
Thank you. Glenn?
So I want to say my comments are partially about the overall text, but largely about where we talk about the highlighted text up there, the paragraph that's currently highlighted up there. As I read through this, we are being so balanced on both sides of the thought of, are they in, are they out? Do you have to do it? Do you not have to do it? I worry that the reader is going to get lost in the way we've expressed our meaning. And that may likely lead, as it has in the past, to people both misreading our intent as currently written, but worse, people deliberately misreading the intent to fit their expectations of what they want to achieve. And that's always a troublesome outcome, because it means we fail to convey concisely what we're really trying to say in an unambiguous way. And I do worry that we are bouncing around a little bit. I have a suggestion. That's why I was looking for the link to this actual edited text. I was actually going to try to drop it into an AI system and actually asking questions about what is it like, given this following text, what am I allowed to do? Can I do this? Can I do that? Actually, to use, for the lack of a independent, first time viewing this expert in the space, which we don't have in this room, to try to have an AI be that entity. Because I do worry that as written that it could lead to high misinterpretation or deliberate misinterpretation.
Okay. So I hear concerns.
Also, I was trying to drop in the AI so I should provide.
I don't know
First, give me
that
the pull request link. Is there where's the editor's copy of this?
It's in GitHub.
Okay, I thought I looked at GitHub, but I didn't see an edit.
Right. I don't know that as a group we should walk down the road of using AI to.
I'm not suggesting that. I'm not suggesting that as the path.
Whatever tools you use, Glenn, that's on you. Who's next?
Justin.
I battled with it historically, part of the way some other people did, but I kind of come to the conclusion in my mind that I think that speaking about the historical part points to the fact that historically this may have been done differently. Take notice that the mechanisms now are more direct than they were. So if you thought we were doing this one way before, take note that we're doing it differently now. I think that's what I believe we're trying to say here, which is good. I proposed a version in chat that simply removes this has included a bunch of stuff, because I don't think we necessarily need to say that, and maybe it makes it more clear.
You mean the entire sentence?
Pretty much, that's what like I just, no, and the next sentence, actually. So the two sentences, so it's just, historically, we did this for a bunch of reasons. This is different now. That's it.
All right.
It's not terrible. Thank you. Victoria? We cannot hear you if you're speaking. Okay, Meredith?
I just want to push back very hard on that. I just very strongly disagree that if what we are saying here is we are now enunciating preferences in a different way, do not acknowledge directly that those may still be limited by valid accessibility research for whatever reasons. I think this will be read to overrule, at least by many people, to claw back those existing uses. And so that's why I think it's important to say here that you may look at these preferences and still determine that your uses historically for things like accessibility are preserved.
I respond.
Very quickly.
I think some of that was addressed yesterday in some of the other parts of the document, but I definitely.
Or search though, but not.
Okay, fair enough.
Thank you. Victoria, you want to try again?
Yes, sorry, I didn't hear my name the first time.
Okay.
I strongly agree that for the same reasons we both said, or Meredith just said, and also that we discussed yesterday, the list of these exceptions really does need to be here in both sections. And I think that seemed to be the consensus of the group yesterday. To the extent there are new concerns about that, maybe
Please don't try to characterize consensus. The chairs will do that.
Sorry, I don't mean consensus, but I mean to the extent that there are concerns we didn't discuss yesterday. I mean, those might be worth considering, but other than that, it seems like there was support, no, not trying to say consensus, for recognizing that these are good uses of the technology that we don't want to imply should be clawed back now, or that we're changing the system in a way like what we're doing now that's different is a reason to no longer recognize these uses as acceptable.
Yeah, I think one point, Victoria, like that, I think Kevin made yesterday was like to kind of combine good. I don't think this characterizes this as good uses. It's just historical uses, right? It's kind of a combination of good or like not good stuff. So I just wanted to make sure that that's noted somewhere.
So I think where we're at here is we're hearing from some folks that this text doesn't add something, or it may cause confusion. It's not well stated. We're hearing from other folks that this is very important to them and that they need to see something like this in the draft. So I think the paths forward are either to try and clarify this text and address the first concerns, or to convince the other folks that this text isn't necessary, or create a strong argument that the text isn't necessary, that we can declare that in the rough. That we've been going back and forth on this for a long time. So please consider carefully, how do we make progress here?
Paul, go first.
I also want to reiterate the point that I made yesterday, that I think the historically in here is very strange language-wise. It implies that there is a shared history, and that I think a lot of concerns that are sort of embedded in this thing are very particular US legal system concerns that are in here. Historically, other legal systems have dealt with this, being very explicit about what's allowed, and a sort of unqualified historically in here sounds, I think, to a lot of readers outside of this room, this community, will be very strange.
Thank you. 2-minute robot.
My my concern is again within the realm of enforceability. I understand that we're not defining enforceability, but I don't think you can ignore it. And I think that we haven't. I don't currently think we have a vocabulary in which good actors can comply because there's not enough carve-outs. I think that this paragraph is inadequate to meet that need. But I'm reluctant to remove it at like this stage of the document myself. That I think that it's maybe it's a thorn, but it's like a thorn I don't want us to remove until kind of later in the process. Maybe it should live somewhere else.
Yeah, there was discussion when we were working this out in the search category of maybe refactoring the mention of accessibility and kind of other considerations from that category up into the vocabulary overall. And I wonder if that might be a way kind of out of this, because I think that language was a bit more acceptable to folks. But also, I agree. I think those are really important considerations to reflect somewhere in the vocabulary. And I don't know that like a reference to historical practice is the best way to do it, rather to say that, you know, there may be valid motivations for not following a preference, including but not limited to accessibility or preservation or, you know.
So this is a little weird text, and I think that's part of the tension that we're getting here, is that we're trying to walk this line between saying that there are things that people will use to justify basically ignoring a preference and not coming out and trying to enumerate those things. I think Erin's point here about find the specific carve out about accessibility doesn't really address the core problem that we have here. It would help if we sort of reified this idea that accessibility was a thing, but then that privileges accessibility over some of the other things that people care about. And I think that doesn't really get to the core of the reasons that we have this sort of text in the document. I think with Alyssa's proposal here, and this is largely based on that, the idea is to try to walk that line by saying that there are a bunch of reasons that people have chosen to effectively ignore people's preferences if stuff is used, without explicitly endorsing those practices. And part of, I think, Kevin's suggestion here was helpful in doing was identifying things that some people might object to. And so I included the advertising and surveillance items in that list for specifically that reason, because then it gives us that sort of, here are some of the things that people have in the past in some jurisdictions chosen to use as justification for ignoring preferences, but we're not doing anything to endorse particular practices one way or another. And that was a deliberate choice here, following in the sort of suggestion that Alyssa had. But I recognize that this doesn't go far enough for some people, and it doesn't address the sorts of concerns that Meredith and Tim and Robot have raised here. And I don't know how much protection we need to add in the document for these practices. I know a lot of people are looking for this document to sort of endorse some set of practices that they consider important to them. But fundamentally, I don't know that we can do that in this document. And so by saying historically and recognizing that these exceptions exist, without endorsing any of them, hopefully walks that line. But I'm not, I recognize that this is weird text as a result.
Chris?
Yeah, so I wanted to respond to something that a previous speaker, was it Victoria, said about the work here sort of not making it explicit that, you know, what we're not trying to do is to influence that kind of surrounding regulatory context through our work. Now, what we're, you know, I think that would be a mistake. Like if we end up with something here which ends up, you know, being more restrictive, seems like a bad outcome. So saying something to the effect that, you know, we're not trying to influence that sort of one way or the other, perhaps maybe a helpful way to frame it. Because if that's if that's what the underlying concern is, then you know, let's, you know, then I can think we can sort of speak directly to that.
Thank you. Meredith?
So I think one of the things we're grappling with here is like, because we deal with these, the nature of this process is that we deal with very little chunks of the text at a time. And so there's been some discussion of like where in the whole structure of the document these concerns go. And so one of the things I would say is maybe, you know, it's 11:45, maybe we can take some time between now and our next online meeting to look and think about where these go in the whole structure of the document. There's also that section about potential impacts, which I don't totally understand how that reads into the spec at all, I would say. But I can look at this drafting. This is weird, bad. I think there's just like a bunch of things mashed together, but I know there's a few of us, Timid Robot, me, Leela, who could work on this and try to have something that isn't too ambiguous, but just that does communicate some concrete signposts.
Thank you.
And
Yeah, I think the effort to be vague by referring to history is vague in the wrong way. I am understanding the discussion here as us saying this room is trying to communicate to future users of the vocabulary and future possible enforcers of the vocabulary that we understand that the vocabulary may not like apply in all circumstances, or that there may be considerations or contexts in which it is valid not to follow the preferences. And can we agree on and just say that?
I think that is what the section also does.
I don't.
Okay, so the paragraph above.
Yeah. Again, this is descriptive of what might happen in future and not a statement about how to interpret the preferences.
That's a good point. Can I request that you attempt to just give us a very direct
Yes, I
statement?
was writing it when my
Perfect.
came up.
Right.
Kathy?
I'm from a fintech background, and fintech surprisingly has a lot of models that they train based off of in the ecosystem, mouse movements when I purchase my Banana Republic, to ensure that I'm not a fraudster and I'm not typing things too fast and whatnot. And I don't think that, and the reason from a data privacy standpoint, there's not controls to allow fraudsters to opt out, and the legal basis for processing is not consent and rather it's legitimate interest, is because you don't want to let the fraudsters opt out. None of us, we all want to continue to participate in the fintech ecosystem without getting defrauded, right? And so I think that sentiment applies for, some of the discussion we previously had regarding CSAM and such. So I wonder if the solution here is to, with respect to the training definition, because I feel like this language is kind of more like pre-picture language that folks might not pay attention to. But if we can add clarity to the main document around training control, because I suspect that the group is predominantly focused on adding an opt-out associated with Gen AI models that deal with the output of, images and text and all of those things. I don't think this group is trying to provide an opt-out associated and a preference opt-out associated with training of, the models that frankly in our day-to-day, we don't even realize is happening in the background that protect us from fraud as, as the fintech industry, relies so heavily on. So I wonder if it's about going back to the training definition and narrowing that to foundational models that produce the type of content that is focused on Gen AI around text and image and video and audio.
Paul?
Yeah, I think it's broader. Like this is essentially about a public interest acknowledged slash exception, and maybe exception is too strong this word. And I think this document is going to be incomplete when we are not having something in there. Like this is a constituency that is not very well represented in these discussions. That's sort of like likely to fall by the wayside. I think Philip pointed out that these are generally very, very, very risk averse organizations who want to do the good thing. And we need to speak to them in order for them to understand their place in this. And that needs to be by, I think honestly, like the enumerative list that wasn't complete is more or less the only way you can do that, by clearly pointing out what this is supposed not to restrict. And I think we need to be mindful of the concerns that were expressed yesterday, that this can't veer into the territory where using the preferences equals granting a license or a positive right to them, but like you need to speak to them. Otherwise, this will create collateral damage. And language like historically, like they will read this as, like they are so risk averse, they will read this as in the past this was okay and now it's not okay anymore. And this just doesn't help. Like I think we, in the end, and I think Meredith suggested that we really need a piece of public interest language in here, and I very gladly see something coming from you that tries to address that. That doesn't go as far as
I'll be
sort of like, yeah.
Well,
yeah, so we'll cut the queue at Glenn.
Yeah.
So, thank you. Meredith, go ahead and say whatever you wanted to say to.
No, I was just promising Paul would be a very careful, small drafter.
Thank you. Next, Max.
Yeah, I wanted to just respond a little bit to what I think Aaron and Kathy were saying. Two steps. So I don't really agree that we should be giving guidance to enforcement, like to enforcers on like when exceptions exist, or like dictate why they exist. Like I understand some of the instincts here, but I don't think that's what we should be doing. And I think it's firmly on individual publishers to make those decisions on what they do want and do not want to accept in terms of exceptions. And I want to like especially address like Kathy's point around like fintech models. I don't think that's a very good metaphor in this case. I don't think this is like you're sort of expressing like user consent in processing models, and I don't think that model really applies to like the site owner model creator relationship. I think it's different.
Thank you. Timid Robot.
Timid Robot. I just wanted to respond that it was my understanding that we can't restrict training down to foundational models based on a conversation yesterday because or just generative models because the models that you wouldn't call generative still have the capacity to be generative. And so while basically that category exists in our minds, but once we try to nail it down, it's nearly impossible. Thank you.
Glenn, last word.
Wow, pressure. I'm not against coming up with some kind of language here. I will say that as an industry that has suffered greatly at people trying to use these little public interest exceptions to say movies should be free, content should be free, right? I am worried that the selection of language here, while I appreciate it opens up support for the public interest, could also be misused for support for what folks I'm a researcher, or I'm a public interest cause, want to make other things available to. And so getting raised is critical. I don't think it can be done, but if you want to take a shot at it, I won't say no.
Okay. So it's clear that we need to continue discussing this. It's clear we need proposals. I hope everyone now has more of a sense of the challenges we face in this area. I think that there's a very delicate balance to be had. The question in my mind right now is, do we think that the current text in the specification is the best place for us to launch that development from, or is this text an improvement over that?
So I have three suggestions.
Sure.
Because Erin made a suggestion in the chat that I think is reasonable.
Okay.
First is the text in the current draft. Second is this.
Mm-hmm.
Third is this with the final paragraph removed and a sentence added. And there's a diff in chat that the sentence that Erin suggested was, there may be considerations that take precedence over any stated preferences, especially when taking the public interest into account. And that follows on from the sentence at the very top.
Let me see if I can find this. So I see a long-ish, diff-ish looking thing from you. Is that it?
That's it.
And I'm looking for that.
It's in the top with the pixels, like it's the third line from the top.
Okay, hold on. I'm dealing with the excellent interface here. What's the best way to do this?
Actually, just for clarity, Aaron's proposal is to make this a 2-sentence paragraph, the entire section. So diff would minus out.
I know you suggested that, but I'm just simply taking the sentence and trying to preserve the rest of it because I think that there is stuff that we've added to the rest of this that still carries value in that context. That would be the fourth option here, I guess, which is to remove the entire section and replace it with a very short statement like you suggest.
At least we can talk about that.
Yeah.
So your formulation would be
Aaron's formulation would be just that one sentence at the top of that section. That one plus that. And I'm suggesting that there's a version of this that takes that takes those two things and simply puts them in place.
So remove the historically paragraph and make this modification.
So that's one option. What Erin is suggesting is that this is the entirety of that section. Like replace all the other remove all the other paragraphs aside from this, which I don't think is going to work because we've had a lot of questions about what it means to follow and respect preferences.
I think the rest of it reflects a fair amount of discussion that we've had.
Right.
I think at least the next paragraph is, I think, essential. Like the other mechanisms piece is, I think it's very
things like that.
I do have questions about. I think this is a little bit elaborate, but that's an editorial comment, not a substantive one.
We could probably trim those introductory paragraphs,
but basically, what you're saying is
those things I think are
more substantive. Yeah.
Ooh, paragraph markers.
Hey. Whose style sheet did that?
They're not supposed to be copyable. I think you're using the wrong browser.
Or maybe I'm using the wrong.
Oh no, it's the GitHub thing.
So that's that proposal, more or less. I'm conscious of the time, but if folks, especially the folks who were very keen to have the list in the specification, any initial reactions?
I think Timid Robot and Meredith.
Yeah.
I do think that it seems like the historically paragraph kind of cuts perhaps all the wrong ways. And I'm happy. I like the addition. I'm happy to remove it with the assumption that we'll be working on bringing something else.
Of course, none of this is set in stone. We're just looking for a way to move forward and improve the specification over what we have now. If you can come up with text that we can get comfort around, we're not going to say, no, we can't consider that. So.
Meredith?
So I think having some, like, if this is the text that we're at here, I think, am I missing any?
It's like a
I
public
think
interest.
I would put like one clause after that sentence, especially when taking the public into account. I think one of the things you can say here to make the drafting more clear is that individual actors who do this may have to make their own determination. Like, this is, I think, the piece that is missing, right? Is that, like, if you are the person doing this work for accessibility, for research, whatever, you have to make your determination of that.
The last paragraph.
Not the first sentence.
But is that last paragraph doing that?
I do not think it does that work.
Really?
As a choice.
Yes.
Can you say more?
Um,
Make a choice about whether to respect preferences, and it makes a choice according to their understanding of
yes.
what they're going to do. And
I don't think it does the work. I can try to write something. I just can't come up with the words right now. Like,
But it sounds like it's a matter of redrafting that last paragraph to make it a little crisper, not a fundamental change.
I think it includes some specific examples. So, like, to the extent that the disagreement is out, they take out all specific examples, like accessibility and research, or not. I think you need to have those, not to say that they are always permitted, but to say those are the types of things you are talking about here, and not something else.
actually, I don't think this is talking about anything specific at all.
Yeah.
It's simply saying that if you have information that the person expressing the preference doesn't have, you use that information in making a decision about whether to respect that preference.
I just disagree. I'm sorry.
Can you make a proposal, Meredith? I know it's not now, but like I think we can discuss it then, because I think this text moves us forward. I'm sure like we can do like more passes at it and discuss them as they go, because I think it's a strict improvement on what we have today.
I think I'm next. I think it's a little bit tautological to say that whether a preference applies to a use depends on how the asset is used and how that usage corresponds to the usage categories. And then saying that it also depends on the applicable legal context is really in tension with the statement just above that these preferences do not create rights, obligations, or prohibitions. So I feel like
they do not themselves.
I can see the first sentence adding useful clarity, but I think that the others and I think that Meredith's concerns about giving a little bit more comfort to users who want, like, users of the vocabulary, not end users, but to services that want to do accessibility or some of those other potentially challengeable activities, like that could be added to the first sentence or following from it, and we don't need the next one.
Sorry, I'm not sure I understood the point. Would you mind just like repeating? I'm not sure I understood what you meant.
Sure. So saying that an entity will decide like whether a preference applies based on how the asset is used and how the usage corresponds to the usage categories, that's just saying, you know, all of the things that the usage categories have already said. Like, these are the uses in the category. And so I don't think that that is useful addition. Then saying that the entity makes that determination based on the legal context is introducing a notion of legal obligation that we have just disclaimed in the preceding paragraph. And so that creates ambiguity and also I think doesn't help.
Yeah, Paul, do you want to chime in on that?
Yeah, I don't think we're disclaiming that in the first sentence. It's that on its own, it does. Like both in the EU legal context, like there's both the situation that AI training doesn't restrict AI training for research purposes. If you meet the conditions of being a research organization, you can just ignore that based on that thing. I think that is describing on its own. It doesn't say something you can, if you assess your legal background, if you understand your legal position in the system, you can ignore it. The other way around, in the EU context, probably some of these qualify as an opt-out for the for TDM thing, and it creates sort of legal liabilities if you don't follow that thing. And I think that is what we're trying to say. On itself, they don't.
But when combined
Taking
with the
legal
law,
context into account,
they
may. But do we have to say that? Because the legal context already says that. And if we are going to mention what context is appropriate to take into account, then why is it only the legal context?
Erin, we need to say this because we have been asked this question again and again and again. And if we fail to address it,
Having a positive right under EU law to engage in a research use of AI is one of the considerations that may take precedence over any stated preference.
right, it's too vague. We've had too many questions about this to not at least provide some indication of beyond the very abstract thing that you suggested.
Thank you. Victoria?
Yeah, I just sort of wanted to echo the concerns that I'm not sure this is moving in a better direction. And I'm also a little concerned about, again, process is not my role, so I understand that maybe I just don't know what the process is, but it seems like it might be more productive to have, you know, whoever is interested in coming up with an alternative for us to consider, you know, take time to go do that rather than trying to draft sort of by committee, because I think that we're maybe rejecting each other's suggestions preemptively before we see the whole thing. I just think it's hard to do or to write this way, especially when something's discussed.
I think Meredith and Tim and Robot volunteered, Victoria, so I think if you can kind of talk to them and come up with a proposal, I think that would be the best way forward.
Yeah, we're definitely not going to come up with text here. I think it's more we're trying to poke around what the sensitivities are, what the considerations that people have are, so that people who do that drafting have a better chance of coming up with something that might succeed.
Perfect. Thank you.
I think Warren?
Maybe
Yeah,
close
I
the
put
queue
it
at
in
Warren.
chat, but I think that we could address both sides by just including how that usage corresponds to blah, 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 the applicable legal context, etc., because that makes it clear that there are others. I still think just dropping it, but I understand that's not necessary. But that makes it clear that these aren't the only considerations and there might be other ones.
I think the word otherwise allows it, Warren, right? Like at least. Yep. I think
let's call it there. Clearly we're going to need more discussion around this area. My only remaining question is, you know, the current text in the document doesn't seem to be helping. We know that this text isn't there either. But if we should we just leave it as is for now?
I think we should. And but Martin,
I
is
think
it
this is a distinct improvement over what we previously
for sure, right? Like
I'd be supportive of going ahead and merging this as long as there's a very clear indicator that that text is still not done, and that we're going to have issues against it.
So I think we have promises from Meredith and Timid Robot to try to address that aspect of it. I think Erin is going to give us an attempt at trying to narrow it,
Simplify it, yeah.
clarify it in some way. I don't know what that was, but
I did in the chat. It's part of this PR.
I'm asking that you do something more concrete than that and give us a concrete change. Same for these guys.
Right. Do you want to merge something soon?
I think we should merge what has been proposed here with the understanding that there are outstanding changes suggested.
This on the screen?
Effectively, this on the screen.
I'll send you a URL.
No, I have that already transcribed.
Okay, cool. All right, let's put a pin in that then. And if folks could work on those proposals and bring them to the list, to the discussions. We've got 20 minutes left. No, sorry.
We have 50 minutes left.
We have 50 minutes left, if people are willing. Let's move on to the use discussion. We had a long discussion yesterday. We hopefully have people who are going to go off and have chats and come up with proposals. Is there anything else we can usefully use this time for to guide that, especially in light of the developments we've had around the training term and around the search term? And also our discussion of purpose-based and so forth and so on.
I have on the relevant issue, which was what was it? Category for rack and grounding 172. I have made a suggestion for a new category. If you scroll all the way to the bottom.
172?
172.
This? Come on.
This is very much intended as a starting point for discussion. It takes the label AI input and the first sentence more or less from what's in the RSL specification Cloudflare uses for the content signals. And then it adds a exclusion that tries to draw a line between assets that are being retrieved by systems versus assets that are being directly provided as input by end users, either as assets or as specific pointers to locations where assets can be found. So it tries to draw this line between trivial augmented generation and user, like direct user inputs, in order to keep those out of the scope of the control.
Any initial reactions?
What's the
No, sorry.
So I do think that it would be helpful for me as someone who's thinking of proposing something to understand this, talk a little bit about this end user thing. And I understand where it's coming from. The way many applications are being developed, though, it becomes another one of these like blurred lines sort of thing, because is it user providing it if the application asks, you want me to go out and scrape these 10,000 websites and do this, and then you just say yes. And I mean, they don't, maybe not 10,000, but they very frequently are applications that will suggest using something. And so it's like, where does because all actions by any sort of system is directed by a human at some level, the highest level of it. And so we have to draw the line somewhere around there, or else it's just literally everything is directed because there aren't automated systems that operate in the absence of some sort of human setting them into motion.
If I may, in talking to Paul about this one, I think the idea was that where assets are directly provided, either provided or referenced, it will be singular assets. So directly identified or directly provided assets, as opposed to like singular things, rather than, you know, please go to this website and do these things, or look at the following collection of things. Those would be included in the retrieval side of this rather than the directly provided side. Does that help?
I don't think so, because what is that asset? If that asset is a URL, then it includes everything at that site. And if
just the things at that URL in that case. So if it's a single URL, that is a single resource that you're asking the model go and retrieve, rather than going off and following links and what have you. And we'd have to work on.
I guess my question is more about what, like, these systems, like the model itself may suggest assets, and then the user may sort of confirm that. Like that, this happens a lot with these models where they're asking for sort of confirmation of, do you want me to do this?
I mean, the intent is to keep that outside, right? Like to say, no, to keep that inside the AI input category. So like if the system, like this is a very quick, this morning on the way here, drawn up thing. We need to draw this line somewhere. And the intent is sort of like user directly inputs where the system starts selecting something. So that I think that is clearly on the side of what should be within the control of this. So the scenario that you give where the system start like the language isn't there yet, but like the intent here is where the system starts suggesting things to you, it's not direct user input anymore.
Yeah. But if I say yes, and in response to a suggestion by the system.
Yeah, but it's not directly, you say yes to something that's.
I think I think we recognize the problem in that. I would also be interested in pressing a little bit on understanding why it is that the fact that a user provides something means we don't want to allow the asset owner to express a preference, because, for example, you know, user could take a photo that a user has posted on their personal website and ask an application to do all sorts of things to that photo. And there might be a reason why the owner of that asset who published it would want to have a preference attached to that asset, that applications which are being used by the user could say, no, I'm sorry, I can't follow that request. And in fact, I would note that several prominent applications currently do this. If you try to upload like a photo of, say, a famous mouse or something like this, they will say, you know, I can't modify that because there is some sort of you know, thing in there. And so I would think that we could offer a preference that would extend that same sort of respect or ability to express a preference to everyone, even in the user provided context.
So can I just respond to that? Yeah. I think you're asking for the intent, because I am very much concerned that anything that is going to enable overreach with regards to that will prevent me to do things that I'm legally, morally, that's nobody else's business to prevent me from doing to things that I have legal access to. And I think we want to find a balance there. We want to introduce safeguards there that sort of, in the absence of such a category, the systems you described already do that.
I feel like
I think Nate, I think you made your point. I think we'll go along and we'll come back to it, right? But we just need to hear other people. So, Brad.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, this is a difficult one. I mean, and Nate hits on a bunch of the issues. I mean, so you know, I think we're sort of closest to addressing the concern where the asset is provided directly by an end user. I think that where it starts to be an asset in a remote location, or one that is facilitated by sort of a scraping activity by a model, that's where things start to get a bit messy for a couple of reasons. That's exactly how some users are bypassing password controls or capture mechanisms that specifically are designed to kind of ensure that it's really users that are visiting websites as opposed to bots and crawlers. That's number one. So you may disagree with that practice, but I just want to put it out there because that's kind of what happens, and there is an impact on publishers on that front. The other element, which we haven't gotten into a lot of or any discussion about, is that obviously we're going to be talking in the next phase about attachment mechanisms and robots.txt, and there's a stated policy out there from a number of companies that their fetching is not going to recognize robots.txt as opposed to regular crawling. So I want to kind of just foreshadow that as you think about, because now we don't have to have that discussion now. Obviously, that'll be an attachment mechanism discussion, but there's this bifurcation of thinking about how content acquisition is happening and what controls that are put around that should be respected or not. That plays into how we think about a use preference.
Thank you. Thanks, Brad. Brad, I think one of the points of this is we don't have anything in this regard, right? So just Paul is throwing up a straw man proposal to kind of take a look at. So it's totally fine if you and Nate, I think you promised yesterday to go look at something to make a proposal, make that proposal. I think if you cannot get consensus, this doesn't get in, right? Whatever that is. So if you want an alternate proposal, please make it.
And I want to remind folks that our scope here is to allow people to express their preferences, not necessarily to enforce them.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. I just want to we're sort of opening this up, so let's put all the different issues on the table for us to pick at.
Thank you. Leonard?
Yeah, Paul, as you probably may guess, I have significant objections to the second sentence up there. That's something that, as you know, from day one of working with you before this committee and on this committee, that I have expressed a huge desire based from our customers to do, which is that absolutely assets provided as input by end users must have their, I shouldn't say must, rephrase that, should have their preferences respected when the application in question believes it is appropriate to do so. So, and as was noted, I forget by whom, I apologize, in chat, that that's no different than respecting or not respecting those preferences in any other scenario that we are covering. So I would request very strongly that you remove that second sentence.
Thank you, Leonard. I think we can get back to that. So, Timid Robot?
Hello, Timid Robot. Again, I think this points to the need for some top level carve outs so that the preference can, or the category can stand on its own.
Justin?
There is a use case for RAG where it could be used as part of a, lack of a better term, retraining algorithm, back propagation, retraining, whatever, that I question if this doesn't prohibit. So I might want to allow RAG, but not allow training. We've talked a lot about training, and I could be wrong, but in retrieving assets into a system that generates an output, that output could be some form of training. And it's not specifically forbidden here. Is it forbidden somewhere else and I'm missing it? Or
No, that's a good point. So Justin's point here is that if this particular use involves the refinement of the model, which is often the case in things like ChatGPT, then maybe we need to be careful to exclude the training in
Explicitly.
That's a good piece of information.
Can I, we could say that, if the AI based system is generating outputs for the purposes of training, please see the training part.
Yeah,
you know,
right.
like you have to follow training rules.
Could you capture that on the issue, just as a follow-on comment?
You think you can answer something?
I'm going to make an attempt. Thank you. I will make an attempt.
That's all you
Nate?
have to do in this case.
Go ahead.
There was discussion earlier in the training definition about
guys.
Previously, we had weights as sort of a stop point where training ended, and I can't remember if we ended up deciding that parameters was going to be sort of included in there instead. But I think that if we did something like that, then the logical way to approach this, understanding we have to address sort of the concerns about overreach, but just from a pure like trying to actually define what we're doing, would be to continue that forward and say that everything after the weights is this category, is inference or whatever this is. And then we can have, and you could do that with one sentence by just basically modifying the training definition we have, and then just applying it to everything kind of after that. And then we could have the debates about like, okay, where should this apply to user initiated things? And if it shouldn't, maybe that can be a two categories. One could be for that. We could talk about that. I mean, I realize that's opening up a can of worms, but you could have a way to express a preference for those user things. And maybe some applications would be more likely to ignore that preference than to ignore a preference, than to choose to ignore a preference that applies to non-user, to system or whatever else you want to call it. I don't know if that approach might be productive, but it's certainly from the draft that we have trying to have consistency of approach, I think would be the simplest approach.
I think where we ended up was that we were going to remove weights or parameters and just talk about use of the data that has an effect on the model, to change the model either in its production or subsequently when it's refined.
So use of the data that does not change.
Exactly. That would be the mirror. Yeah.
And so it just, wherever that line is at the end of training, we just carry this forward. And then we have a debate about what's overreach. And I tend to agree with the approach of, I think these things are best resolved in some sort of like the discussion we just had about sort of global exceptions. Like if you don't want to use the preference because of whatever, or if you want, like there may be things that motivate you to use or ignore a preference. And I think that we keep having that same discussion with every single vocabulary issue. I think it's better done at the level up in the hierarchy.
I think the 3.2 is outside, right? Like all the specific verbs pretty much.
Right. So could you as well try and capture that on the issue? I think that's a great insight as well. We're on 172.
Okay. That looks like we've exhausted the queue, but I don't think we have any other proposals on the table.
No, obviously work needs to happen. I'm inclined to perhaps go ahead and break. If people want to use time to have lunch, that's great. If people want to use time to work on proposals or talk to people, that's great. As we said yesterday, we're planning to have an online only interim in roughly the June timeframe. Then we'll meet in Vienna. Some folks pointed out that US Labor Day is unlike the rest of the planet in September. So we'll try to be kind to those, although I can't tell you how many Australian holidays I've traveled on for standards work, but no, I'm not bitter. We'll try the last week of August. If that causes folks concern, please get that to me and Suresh as quickly as possible. And we'll start to nail those dates
In
down.
person or remote?
This is going to be a hybrid.
Which days do you mean when you say the last week?
Last week.
That would lead us to, if we follow our normal pattern, I think we're looking at
So like the week of Monday.
25, 26, 27, or perhaps 26, 27, 28.
September.
Depending on how you want to spell
August.
that. August. Yes. The week of August 24. Let's not pick out exact days right now, but the week of August 24.
You're thinking Europe.
We're thinking Europe, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, sorry, Europe or the United Kingdom. That's their fault.
Are you looking for a host?
We're looking for, if people have, and again, we have fairly constrained requirements. If people have facilities that they think are appropriate in terms of size, nearness to hotels and restaurants, nearness to international airports. I think that's especially important because people do come a long way. Lack of an NDA, good networking, so forth and so on. Please come to Suresh and I. We do have, yeah, that wasn't a dig at Cisco, sorry. We do have possible hosts in Europe/UK already, so it's not urgent. But if people want to put their hands up, please come talk to us, and we'll try and find the best thing balancing.
No, I would say it's not critical, but it may be urgent because you want to close the deal relatively soon.
Yeah, sorry. It is not critical that we find someone, but if you want to put your hand up, do so quickly, because we would rather get this settled soon rather than wait to the last minute. That has not been good in the past. So in the next couple of weeks, if you could, the most we'd want to hear about that within.
A number of people last night expressed reservations about the Cloudflare option that we met in the past in terms of things like the acoustics in the room or what have you.
Right. So
but there are always these sorts of reservations with the. I find this room to be too large, but it's pretty good otherwise.
It is incredibly rare to find the perfect room, and actually the best rooms I've been in tend to be in universities that have a specific kind of lecture hall. There are different names for it, but it's basically a U-shaped tiered setup. It's fantastic. They're very hard to find. Although in August, maybe we'll find a university. I don't know.
Maybe in Ria, Paris, it's that exact setup.
Well, off you go. Talk to some folks. For that matter, well, no.
That would be greatly appreciated.
It would. Yeah.
We'll
See what you can do.
Scare that up.
But please get to us in the next couple of weeks. Otherwise, we have a couple of default locations that we know we can use. So we'll fall back to one of those.
Hey, Tom, the palace would be nice too if you can swing it.
But yeah, acoustics is often a very good point. We've been I remember Mozilla Paris. That was a great location with horrible acoustics. So.
And that was a smaller group.
Exactly. All right. So thank you all for your patience and your listening and willingness to consider other viewpoints. I think it's been a pretty productive meeting. Let's continue this on the list. We need to make progress outside of these meetings if we want to finish while there are still 2 2s in the year. Thank you to Cisco for hosting us. This has been fantastic. I think everyone's had a good time. And we'll see each other online and hopefully in either Vienna or somewhere else in Europe/UK.
Right, and thanks to everyone for being like super well behaved and like being very like empathetic of like other people's concern. I think that's kind of like we kind of crossed the line there, so like people can see other people's point of view. I think like it took a lot of time to get built up to that. So
and being constructive. I think there's a lot of constructive discussion now.
Very much so.
We're starting to make real progress.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Been good.
Thanks all, and thanks for everybody online, whatever your time zone is. Like, so thanks for being very flexible on this. Thanks.
All right.
Miss you, Chris, and hope to see you soon.
Indeed.
I put that in that.